So, good morning, students and everyone. Again, the faculty and coach Vivek Burda from Tirthanga Mahavir University, Muradabad, is there with you to discuss new content on the topic on the subject of this environment. In the previous session, we have started with the political environment and where we have seen its orientation. Now, moving ahead, this side, we'll be moving to the next topic. The next topic is reinvigorating the state capability. Reinvigorating the state capabilities can be achieved through the following. First is through the rules and the restraints. For example, the mechanism for enforcing the law of the rules of the law, such as independent judiciary, are critical foundation for the sustainable development. Along with the appropriate separation of the powers and the presence of the bodies, they also restrain the arbitrary behavior. Then is the competitive pressure. The competitive pressures can come from within the state bureaucracy through the recruitment of the civil servants on the basis of the merit. It can come from domestic private sector through contracting out for the services, allowing private providers to compete directly with public agencies. Or it can come through the international marketplace, through the trade and through the influence of the global bonds market or the fiscal decisions. Next is the voice of the partnership. This means to achieve the transparency and the openness in the modern society are many and varied. Thus, the business councils, interaction groups, and the consumer groups, to name a few, institutional working arrangements with community groups can contribute to the greater state effectiveness by achieving the citizens a great voice in formulation of the government policies. And the partnership between levels of the government and with the international bodies, it can help in provisions of the local and the global business global public goods. Next topic includes the state institutions and the economic outcomes. The state form set the formal rules and laws and regulations that are part and parcel of the country's constitutional environment. These formal rules, along with the informal rules of the broader society and the institutions that mediate human behavior. But the state is not merely a referee making and enforcing the rules from the satellite, it is also a player, indeed from often a dominant player in the economic games. Everyday state agencies invest resources, direct credit, procure goods and services, and negotiate contracts. These actions have profound effects on the transaction cost and on the economic activities and the economic outcomes, especially in developing economies. Played well, the state activities can accelerate the development. Played badly, they will produce stagnation or, in the extreme, economic and the social disintegration. The state then is in the unique position. Not only it must establish through the social and the political process, there's the formal rules by which all other organizations must abide as an organization itself. That is, too must abide those rules. The next is economic role of the government. The government plays an important role in almost every national economy of the world, even if the countries described the capitalist economies or the market economies. A substantial share of the nation's product goes to satisfy the public wants. A substantial part of the private income originates in the public budget, and the public tax and the transfer payments significantly influence the state or the private income distribution. Moreover, the budget policies affect the level of the employment and the prices in the private sector. In the predominantly private enterprise, the government interface is necessitated by the fact, besides the social, political, ideological reasons, if any, that the market mechanism alone cannot perform all economic functions. Public policy is needed to guide, correct, and supplement it in certain aspects. It is important to realize this fact since it implies that the proper size of the public sector is to a significant degree a technical rather than ideological issue. Next is the impact of the state, the way of state promoting development and how it is, what are the harmful impact of the states. In this, the first point is by providing the macroeconomic and the macroeconomic environment that sets the right incentives for the efficient economic activities. Its impact is that the wrong kind of the rules can actively discourage the creation of the wealth. For example, the state may penalize private wealth by distorting prices through an overvalued currency, for example, or by creating the agricultural marketing boards that the tax farmers output and give them little in return. Next is by providing the institutional infrastructure, property rights, peace, law and order, and the rules that encourages the efficient long-term investments. In this, even if the rules themselves are benign, they may be applied by the public organizations and their employees in harmful fashion. They may, for example, impose huge transition costs in the form of red tape or the bribery, or entrepreneurs setting up the new businesses or restructuring the old ones. Next is by ensuring the provision of the basic education, healthcare, and the physical infrastructure required for economic activities, and by protecting the natural environment. Thus, but potentially the largest source of state inflicted damage is uncertainty. If the state changes the rules often or do not clarify the rules by which the state itself will behave, the businesses and the individuals cannot be sure today and what will be profitable or unprofitable, legal or illegal tomorrow. They may then adopt those costly strategies to ensure against an uncertain future by entering the informal economy, for example, or sending capital abroad, all of which impede developments. This table has been taken up from the World Development Report 97 by the World Bank. So further over here, the government plays important four roles in the economy, that is by regulation, promotion, entrepreneurship, and by the planning. As stated above, the extent and the nature of these roles in the given situation depend upon the number of factors, and some silent features of these roles are outlined below. First is regulatory role. The government regulation of the business may cover a broad spectrum extended from entry into the business to the final results of the business, the reservation of the industries to the small scale, the public and the cooperative sectors, licensing system, etc. regulate the entry, regulations of product mix, promotional activities, etc. amount of regulation of the conduct of the businesses. Thus, the results of the business operations may be regulated by such measures as ceilings on profit margins, dividend, etc. The state may also regulate the relationship between the enterprise. Examples of this include restrictions of intra-corporate investments, interlocking of the directors, and the appointment of the sole selling agents. Thus, in this part, we need to remember that the indirect controls are usually exercised through the various fiscal and the monetary incentives and the disincentives and the penalties. Certain activities will be encouraged, discouraged through the monetary and the fiscal incentives and the disincentives. For instance, a high import duty may discourage imports, and the fiscal monetary incentives may encourage the development of the export-oriented industries. The direct administrative or the physical controls are more drastic in their effect. The distinguishing characteristics of the direct control is their discretionary nature. They can apply it selectively from the firm to firm and industry to industry as the discretion of the state. Regulation of the businesses can remain in the developing countries since the late 1980s. However, the deregulation trend has set in. This has been drastically transformed the competitive environment and has given the impetus to the globalization. Next role is promotional role. The promotional role played by the government is very important in the development as well as in the developing countries. In the developing countries where the infrastructure facilities for the development are inadequate and the entrepreneurial activities are scarce, the promotional role of the government assumes specific significance. The state will have to assume direct responsibility to build up and strengthen the necessary development infrastructure such as power, transport, finance, marketing, institutions, training and guidance, and other promotional activities. The promotional role of the state also encompasses the provisions of various fiscal, monetary, and other incentives, including measures to cover certain risks for the development of the certain priority sectors and the activities. The next includes the entrepreneurial role. In many economies, the state also plays the role of the entrepreneur, the establishing the operating business enterprise and bearing the risk. The number of the factors such as social, political, ideological threat to the private entrepreneurship neglect certain sectors like the unprofitable sectors by the private entrepreneurs, absence of or the inadequate competition in the certain segments, and the result exploitation of the consumers, etc. have contributed to the growth of the state-owned enterprises, that is SOEs, in many countries. There were tendency in many developing countries to assign a dominant place to the public sectors. Thus, the public sector dominance was usually established in capital-intensive projects like steel, capital goods, petrochemicals, and fertilizers, for which the investment requirements were very large and the expected private returns. As pleased in the short run were too law to provide an incentive for the private profitability. In many cases, even when the private sectors were prepared to undertake the risk and invest, the state ownership of such industries existed for one reason to another. However, recently many governments have restored the privatization in varying degrees and have defined the role of public sector. The next role is the planning role. Especially in the developing countries, the state plays a very important role as a planner. The importance of the planning of the less developed economies was often emphasized by Jawaharlal Nehru, the chief architect of the developing planning in India. He rightly observed, whatever it may be in other countries, if undeveloped countries like ours, which have to develop fairly rapidly, the time element is important, and the question is how to use our resources to the best advantage. If our resources are abundant, it will not matter how they are used. They will go into the common pool of the development. But where one's resources are limited, one has to see that they are directed into the right purpose as so as to help the build so whatever one is aiming at. So remember, there are four roles. I'm again repeating. First is planning role, then next is entrepreneurial role, then is the promotional role, and then are the regulatory roles. Each roles are being performed by the governments based on their time frame. Regulatory roles is something where we create the policies, we create the frameworks, we define the guidelines for the businesses to go ahead. Then promotional role is the role played by the government in which they provide various supports, they provide infrastructures, they provide various facilities in the form of promotion activities, either in the form of training and guidance, etc. Next is the entrepreneurial role. Entrepreneurial role is again very important for the economy, which is provided by which is created in support of the state and the government with the entrepreneurs. Because entrepreneur is something, or the entrepreneurship is something which is very important, in which there is high risk involved, and also the social political ideologies are involved over there. And as a planner or the planning role, we need to think for all the long term and the short term planning of the nation, which the government or the state has or the center has to plan out over there. The next topic is the economic system. The economic system is basically the scope of the private business depends to the large extent on the economic system, which indeed is rooted in the political philosophy. At one end, there are free enterprise, market economies or the capitalist economies, and on the other end, there are centrally planned economies or the communist countries. In between these two are the mixed economies. Within the mixed economic system itself, there is wide variation. The freedom of the private enterprise is the greatest in the market economy, which is characterized by the following assumptions. The first is factor of production, that is the labor, land, capital, or the privately owned, and the production occurs at the initiative of the private enterprise. Second is the income is received in the monetary form or by the sale of the services of the factory production and the private enterprise. Third is the member of the free market economy have freedom of choice in so far as consumption, occupation, saving, and investments are concerned. The fourth is the free market economy is not planned, controlled, or regulated by the government. The government satisfies the community or the collective bonds, but does not compete with the private firms, nor does it tell the people where to work or what to produce. Thus, the completely free market economy, however, is an abstract system rather than the real one. Today, even the so-called market economies, which are subject to the number of the government regulation, countries like the United States, Japan, Australia, Canada, and many other countries of the EEC are regarded as the market economies. The communist countries have, by and large, centrally planned economic system under the rule of the communist or authoritarian or the socialist government, and the state owns all means by the production to determine the role of the production and to control the economy according to the central master plan. There is hardly any consumer sovereignty in the central planned economy. Unlike in the free market economy, the consumption pattern in a centrally planned economy is dictated by the state. China, East Germany, Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, etc. have centrally planned economies. However, recently, several of these countries have discarded communist system and have moved towards the market economy. In between the capitalist system and the centrally planned system falls the system of the mixed economy, under which both the public and the private sector coexist, as in India. The extent of the state participation varies widely between the mixed economies. However, in many mixed economies, the state and other nationally very important industries are fully owned or dominated by the state. The economic system thus is very important in determining of the scope of the private businesses. The economic system and the policies are therefore very important external constraints of the business. Next is the trend in the political economic philosophies outlook. While there are no radical differences in the philosophies of the major political parties in some countries, the situation is quite different in some others. The government systems in a number of countries, including several countries which are making a rapid economic progress and having the liberal policies towards foreign capital and the technology, it is not very democratic. Thus, that does not mean that they are not good to make business with. As a matter of fact, in several such countries, the procedures are simpler and decisions are quicker than in some of the bigger democratic countries. Unlike the political and economic changes ushered in the late 1980s and in the early 1990s in the Eastern Europe and the erstwhile USSR, these countries were the separate block of themselves with several common characteristics. Private enterprises were very limited and the state trading, particularly the counter trades, was the rule. There were a lot of restrictions on the imports and the foreign businesses. This did not, of course, mean that the communist system was insurmountable for multinationals or the foreign firms. Under such a firm, in several instances, winning over the top brass of the party or the government was a strategy to open the business. It may be noted that although the companies like PepsiCo were kept out of the India and they were doing better with the countries like USSR. In the past, public sector was assigned a very important role in many communist, particularly the developing countries too. In India, for example, where the industrial policies wanted the public sectors to gain the control over the commanding heights of the economy, limited the scope of the private enterprise, both domestic and foreign, even in the areas where the foreign capital was allowed and there was ceiling on the foreign equity expert participation. Further, in the past, the foreign firms in many developing countries were under the fear of nationalism. The clock, however, has turned a full circle in most of the communist and many other countries. Privatization has progressed at an amazing speed. The erstwhile communist countries in the People's Republic of China, where the Communist Party is still in the power and are on the rapid road from Marx to the market. Although the trend of the direction of the government policies across the world appears to be broadly one of the convergence, and there is a lot of difference in the restrictions and the regulations of the business, scope of the foreign business, trade policies, procedures, incentive systems, and so on. Thus, the coalition government of the different political parties are becoming common. Sometimes the constituents of the coalition are parties and with different economic ideologies, making the scenario complex or the confusing or uncertain. Thus, some political leaders are so powerful that they wield enormous control over the party. The vision and the ideology of such leaders have stupendous implication for the business. Thus, the change in the nature of the state's role or extent of the state involvement in the economy can affect the business environment. When the public sector was assigned a major role in the industrial development and the industrial licensing was very widely applicable, the central government in the India had an imposing position in deciding the location of the projects and the type and the size of the enterprises. However, this substantial reduction in the role of the public sector and declining drastically changed the situation, and now the state governments have much greater role and freedom than in the past in the industrial development, including the promotion of the FDI. There is universal trend towards the political decentralization. This indicates some shift in the power centers firms have to deal with. Thus, the number of the politically independent nations have been on the increase as the results of splitting up of what has been one single country in the several months. A major reason for this is rise in what Naivist calls tribalism, which is defined as belief in the fidelity to one's own kind, defined by ethnicity, language, culture, religion, or the profession. Universally, the desire of the ethnic group to become independent of the supremacy of others is growing. Naivist observes that the democracy greatly magnifies and multiplies the assertiveness of the tribes. Repercussions does the opposites, and the anguished drama of the tribalism is more pronounced where they are repressed the most brutally. According to Naivist, it may be long time before there were 1,000 countries in this world, but by the middle of the century we should be close there to the number. Hostilities between some countries affect businesses of the firms even in the third world. Arab nations, for example, did not do business with the firms having dealing with Israel. These countries even insisted that the third firms who wanted to do business with them must produce a Israel boycott certificate. Because of the political ties with Israel, the US government had adopted countervailing laws to prevent the US firms from complying with this boycott. Sometimes there are also economic sanctions. So the next topic is over here, which represent the government and the legal man. So government and the legal is something which is very important and very carefully need to be understood. Several aspects of the government environment have already been referred to in the previous chapter and in the preceding section of this chapter. A detailed prescription of the government's role in the economy is given in the subsequent chapter. In many countries, with the view of protecting consumer interest, regulations have become stronger. Regulations to protect the purity of the environment and preserve the ecological balances have assumed great importance in many countries. Some governments specific certain standards for the products, including packaging, to be marketed in the country. Some even prohibit the marketing of certain products. In the most nations, promotion activities are subject to the various types of controls. Several European countries restrains the use of children in the commercial advertisements. In a number of countries, including India, the advertisement of the alcoholic liquor is prohibited. The advertisements, including packaging of the cigarettes, must carry the statutory warning that the cigarette or smoking is injurious to the health. Similarly, the baby food must not be promoted as a substitute of the breastfeeding. In countries like Germany, the product comparison advertisements and the use of the superlatives like best or the excellent in the advertisement is not allowed. In the United States, the Federal Trade Commission is empowered to require a company to provide sufficient evidence to substantiate the claim concerning the quality performance of the competitive prices of its product. There are a host of statutory controls on the business in India too. Although the controls have been substantially brought down as a result of liberalization, the number of controls still prevail. Many countries today have a law to regulate competition in the public interest. Elimination of the unfair competition and the dilution of the monopoly powers are important objectives of this regulation. Thus, the certain changes in the government policies such as investment policy, fiscal policy, tariff policy, etc. may have profound impact on the business. Some policy developments create opportunities as well as threats. In other words, the development which brightens the prospects of some enterprises may pose threat to some others. For example, the industrial policy liberalization in India have opened up the new opportunities and the threats, and they have provided a lot of opportunities to the large number of enterprises to diversify and to make their products mix better. But they also have given rise to the serious threats to many existing products by which or by way of increased competitions. Many sellers markets may have given way to the buyer markets. Even products which were seldom advertised have come to be promoted very heavily. This battle for the market has provided a splendid opportunity for the advertising industry. Next in this is the economic roles of the government in India. The constitutional environment, that is the Indian constitution, incorporates a number of matters which are economically very significant and have far-reaching implications. The socio-economic and the political objectives of the Indian Republic and the basic guiding principles of the state functioning have clearly laid down the preamble to the Constitution, the fundamental rights and directive principles of the state policy. The Constitution also outlines the economic powers and the responsibilities of the Union government and the state government. The economic responsibility bestowed on the state by the Indian Constitution is so enormous that it calls for great government interference in the functioning of the economy. In fact, a number of constitutional amendments, including the First Amendment, was effected to enable the state to implement its economic policies and the programs. The preamble of the India is the preamble of the Indian Constitution states that the people of the India have solemnly resolved the Constitution or constitute India into the sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic to secure all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political liberty of thoughts, expressions, beliefs, faith, and worships, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all the fraternity, assuring that the dignity of the individual and the unity and the integrity of the nation. Thus, the preamble of the statute conveys the general object and intention of the legislature in enacting it. Although not an essential feature, whenever a constitution contains a preamble, it expresses the political, religious, and the socio-economic values which it envisages to promote. But it does not control the meaning and the scope of the other provisions of the constitution. However, the preamble may be a guide when the state is vague. Otherwise, the full effect should be given to express the words of the attachment. Yes, the preamble of the Indian Constitution lays down that the attainment of the social, economic, and the political justice and the equality of the status and to the opportunity should be among the most important basic guiding principles of the functioning of the state. As if this were not enough, the Constitution was amended in 1976 to add, among other things, that the India should be a socialist state. In fact, as early as in December 1954, the Indian Parliament accepted the socialist patterns of the society as the objective of social and economic policies, and if so, give this objective more prominence. And it was incorporated in the preamble of the Constitution in 1976 under the controversial 42 Amendment. As the preamble conveys the general objective and the intention of the Constitution and would be a guiding interpretation of the statute, state when it weighs the above mentioned aspects of the preamble of the Constitution, gives some indications of the need and the scope of the state intervention in the realization of the economic and the associated objectives. Thus, the fundamental rights, it has been claimed that the Indian Constitution offers all citizens, individually and collectively, the best fruits of the democracy and those basic freedoms and the conditions of the life which alone make life significant and productive. Thus, the rights enumerated in the Part 3 of the Constitution cover the wide range and are declared to be the fundamental and justiciable. But these rights are not absolute. They are subject to the limitations imposed by the state in order to secure the rights of all the individuals and to promote the greater interest of the community or the state or to serve the ends of the planned society. Now, the fundamental rights enumerated in the Part 3 of the Constitution are: first is the right of equality, second is the right of freedom, third is the right against exploitation, fourth is the right of freedom of the religion, fifth is cultural and the educational right, and the sixth is right of constitutional remedies. Thus, the Constitution has also guaranteed under the Article 19(1)(f) the fundamental right of the property, and the Article 31 has prohibited the deprivation of the property of any person which saved by the authority of the law, and for the deprivation of the property compensation had become paid. But in 1976, the 52nd Amendment of the Constitution abolished the fundamental right to property by deleting the articles 19(1)(f) and 31. However, the Article 30A in new chapter 4, added by the Part 12 of the Constitution, provides that no person shall be deprived of his property saved by the authority of the law. Thus, only the right of the property is no longer a fundamental right. It has been retained as a constitutional right. As the fundamental rights also have economic significance, the right of equality prohibits the discrimination against any citizen on the ground of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. In public employment, it ensures equality of the opportunity to all citizens. This is, however, subject to the certain limitations, such as right of the state of reserve post of the backward class, which, in the opinion of the state, are not adequately represented in the services. The Constitution guarantees the citizens the fundamental right to freedom to practice any profession, carry out any occupation, trade, or businesses. This right is subject to the reasonable restrictions in the interest of the general public under the First Amendment of the Constitution 1951 of the state, which is empowered to make the laws relating to the professional or the technical qualifications necessary for practicing any profession or carrying out any trade, business, industry, or service, whether to the exclusion, complete or partial, of citizens or otherwise. Thus, the fundamental right against the exploitation, prohibition, traffic in the human beings, and beggary and other forms of forced labor and other contravention of this provision shall be the offence punishable in accordance with the law. However, this does not prevent the state from imposing compulsory services for the public purpose. Imposing such service, the state shall make any discrimination on the grounds only in the religion, race, caste, or class on them. Thus, the fundamental right enumerated in the Constitution guaranteed a number of economic rights to the citizens, but at the same time, the state has also empowered to impose the reasonable restrictions of such rights in the public interest. A very important thing to be noted is that this power of the state is to impose the reasonable restrictions in the public interest has resulted in the remarkable increase in the statutory control over the business and the substantial expansion of the entrepreneurial or the participative activities of the state. Consequently, there has been an abridgment of the economic liberty of the citizens embodied in the Article 19(1) of Act. Now, this particular box represents the functions and powers of the Parliament, which is not so important over there for us labels, so we can ignore it out. Next is the fundamental duties. In the fundamental duties, by the 42nd Amendment of the Constitution adopted in 1976, the fundamental duties of the citizens have also been enumerated. These enjoin upon citizens, among other things, to abide by the Constitution, to cherish and follow the noble ideals which inspired our ideal and by national struggles for the freedom to defend the country and render the nation services when called upon to do so, and to promote the harmony and spirit of the common brotherhood amongst all people of the India, transcending the religious, linguistic, and the religious and the secular diversities. Next in this is directive principles. The directive principles of the state policy is a unique feature of the Indian Constitution. The directive principles are in the nature of the directions of the legislature and the executives that should exercise their authority in such a manner as to ensure due respect for and observance of these principles. Although these directives are not justiciable, the court cannot altogether avoid taking cognizance of them. They are imperative basis of state policy and the Constitution directs and the state to apply these principles in making the laws. Thus, the directive principles that are economically very significant are quoted below. First, the state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people by securing, protecting as effectively as it may be by a social order in which the justice, social, economical, political shall inform all the institutions of the nation, like that is under the Article 38A. Second is under the Article 38(2), the state shall, if particularly, strive to minimize the inequalities in income and endeavor to eliminate the inequalities in the status, facilities, and the opportunities, not only among the individuals but also among the group of the people residing in different areas or engaged in the different vocations. Third, the state shall in particular direct its policies towards securing that the citizens, men and women, equally have the right to do an adequate means of the livelihood, that the ownership and the control of the material resources of the community and are distributed as best to subserve the common good. Third, that the operation of the economic system does not result in the concentration of the wealth and the means of the production of the common determinant. Fourth, that there is equal pay for the equal work for both men and women. Fifth, that the health and the strength of the workers, men and women, and the tender age of the children are not abused, and the children are not forced by the economic necessity to enter the vocation unsuited to their age or the strength. Six, that the children are given opportunities and the facilities to develop in the healthy manner and in conditions of freedom and dignity, and that the childhood and the youth are protected against the exploitation and against the moral or the material abandonment. Next, and this is under the Article 39. Next, it will be noted that the section of the Article 39 where 39 was quoted as the basis of certain policies and the acts. Then D point is states that the state shall ensure that the operation of the legal system promote justices on the basis of the equal opportunity and shall in particularly provide for legal aid by suitable legislation or the schemes or in any other way to ensure that the opportunities for securing justices are not denied to any other citizens by reason of the economic or other disabilities under the Article 39A. The state shall take steps to organize the village panchayats and endorse them with such power and authority as may as may be necessary to enable them to function as units of the self-government under the Article 40. Sixth point says the state shall, within the limit of the economic capacity and the development, make the effective provisions for securing the right to work, to education, and to public assistance in case of the unemployment, old age, sickness, and the displacement, and in other cases of the undeserved wants. The state shall make provisions for securing just and the human conditions of the work and for maternity reliefs under the Article 42. The state shall endeavor to secure by suitable legislation or the economic organization or any other to all workers, agricultural, industrial, and otherwise, living wage conditions to work, ensuring the decent standard of life and full enjoyment of the leisure and social and cultural opportunities, and in particular, the state shall endeavor to promote the cottage industries and to and on an individual and the cooperative basis in the rural areas under the Article 43. Next is the state shall take step to the suitable legislation or any other way to secure the participation of the workers in the engagement in the management of the undertakings, establishments, or other organizations engaged in any industries. Then J point states that the state shall promote the special care for the education and the economic interest of the weaker section of the people, and in particular of the scheduled caste and of the scheduled tribes, and shall promote them from social injustices and all form of exploitation under the Article 46. K point states that the state shall regard the raising of the level of the nutrition and the standards of the living of its people and its improvement of the public health as among its primary duties, and in particularly the state shall endeavor to bring up broad prohibition of the consumptions, exceptions of the medical purposes of intoxicating drinks and of the drugs which are injurious to the health under the Article 47. Then next is the L. The state shall endeavor to organize the agriculture and the animal husbandry on modern and scientific lines, and shall particularly take steps of preserving and improving the breeds, prohibiting the slaughter of the cows and calves and other milch and raw cattle under the Article 48. Then the M point states that the state shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard the forest and the wildlife of the country under the Article 48A. These directive principles made very clear how important is the economic responsibility bestowed on the state of the Constitution. Through constitutional amendments, new directives were added to provide the greater socialistic orientation to the development. For instance, in 1978, by 48th Amendment, a new clause was added to the Article 38, and this new clause contains the directives of the tribes to minimize the inequalities in the status, facilitates the opportunities. Thus, the 42nd Amendment incorporated a new Article 43A to direct the state to take suitable steps to secure the workers' participation in the management. There have been many occasions when the directive principles and the fundamental rights have been were there. In the early days, the Supreme Court held that the fundamental rights were sacrosanct part of the Constitution and nothing, including the directive principles, could override them. But the view that the fundamental rights should be subordinated to the directive principles gained out in the later years, while asking the Lok Sabha to refer the Constitution, that is the Fourth Amendment Bill, to the Select Committee. The Prime Minister Nehru declared that the fundamental rights must serve in directive principles in the Keshwanand Bharati versus the state of Kerala. Justice Matthew observed that in building up the social order, it is sometimes imperative that the fundamental right should be subordinated to the directive principles, economic goals, which has uncontestable claim for the priority over the ideological ones of the ground that excellence comes only after existence. It is only if the man existed that there can be a fundamental rights. So over here, the next topic in this topic is the freedom of the trade, commerce, and intercourse. According to the Article 301 of the Constitution of India, the trade, commerce, and intercourse throughout the territory of India shall be free. This freedom, however, is not without restrictions. This is the freedom guaranteed by under the Article 301 is in its widest terms and applies to all forms of the trade, commerce, and intercourse. It is subject only to the restrictions specified in the Article 302 to 305, and the freedom to carry on the trade, the commerce, and intercourse throughout India guaranteed under the Article 301 cannot be taken away by the executive actions. According to Article 302 to 305, the state can impose reasonable restrictions to the freedom expressed by the Article 301. Accordingly, Parliament may impose such restrictions on the freedom of trade, commerce and intercourse between one state's other or within any part of the territory of the India as may be required in the public interest. As the state governments are empowered to impose any tax on the goods imported from other states if similar goods in the state are subjected to the similar tax, and so not to discriminate between the goods and so imported and goods manufactured or produced in the state. Next one is the separation of the powers. See, the separation of power is an important feature for the Indian Constitution. The separation of the power contemplates the idea that the government functions must be based on the tripartite division of the legislature, executive, and the judiciary. Each organ should be separate, distinct, and the sovereign, and it must allocate the sphere, and it should not exercise the function assigned to others. Justice as Chief Justice Subba Rao observed in the Gokul Nath versus the State of Punjab, the Constitution demarks the jurisdiction of these organs minutely and experts them to exercise the respective powers without overstepping their limits. They should function within the spheres allotted to them. No authority created under the Constitution is supreme, and the Constitution is supreme, and all the authorities function under the supreme law of the land. Next is division of the power. The Indian Constitution distributes the items for the legislation among the three lists: the union list, state list, and the concurrent list. The respective jurisdiction of the union and the state and their mutual relations have been clearly defined. The unions have exclusively power to make laws on the matters in the union list, and the state and have exclusively powers to make the laws in the state list except for the union territories. The center cannot normally legislate or on any matter included in the state list. Thus, the Parliament can, however, do so if the Council of the State recommends by at least two-thirds majority that such legislation is in the national interest. If two or more states mutually agree that this should be done for such states or to implement the treaties or to the international agreements of the conventions, both the union and the states can legislate both the union and the states can legislate on the matter in the concurrent list. However, in case of any conflict between the union laws and the state laws, the union laws shall prevail. Further, the unions has exclusive power to make the laws on any matter for enumerated on the concurrent list or the state list. The expansion in the state interventions. The first full decade of the planning witnessed an expansion of the state intervention in the moment the constitutions are amended. Number of times the Constitution of India, which came into force in 1950, was first amended in the very next year. By the first amendment of the Constitution, the state has the power to impose the restrictions on the right of the citizens to carry on any trade, business, industry, or service with a view of enabling the state to undertake any scheme or nationalization or prescribing the professionalism or technical qualifications necessary for participating in a profession or carry on an occupation, trade or the business. Because the state has from time to time increasing powers to control the private activity and enlarge its own ownership and management of the economy. Was the brief account of the economic significance of the Indian Constitution given above make it abundantly clear that the state has to shoulder a very high responsibility to attain the egalitarian goals which set forth in the Constitution. Any responsibility should have commensurate authority also. Over the years, the government has assumed enormous powers to control over the economy. Most efficiently and judicially, these powers have been exercised, and how satisfactorily the problems have been resolved are the different questions. Now, this particular diagram shows the government which have been effectively playing in all the four directions. In this, first is the judiciary, the second is the executive, the third is legislature. When we talk about the executives, see, judiciary means the law. Executives means those people who implement those laws, and legislatures are those people who pass these laws or who frame these laws. So executives are both at the central and at the state, and in parallel there are also the concurrent list. Now the central list at the central government employees, the state list has the state government employees, and even the local of the panchayat level employees. Now, what is their main task? The main task of both central and state government is to plan out the budgeting, is direct involvement in the business, policies, guidelines, code, laws, development, promotion, organizational, that is the development banks, export development authorities, then we also include about various regulatory organizations such as SEBI, TRAI, etc. Thus, the first 4 decades have witnessed a clear trend towards the expanding control of the state over the various segments of the economy. With the increase in the problem, there has also been a tendency on the part of the government to arm itself with more powers of the control over the functioning of the economy. The Industries Development and Regulation Act, the Companies Act, Capital Issues Control Act repealed, however, the Liberalization, Securities Contract Regulation Act, Monopolies and the Restrictive Trade Practice Act, Essential Commodities Act, Prevention of the Black Marketing, Maintenance of the Supplies of the Essential Commodities Act, Conservation of the Foreign Exchange and the Preservation of the Smuggling Activities Act, Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, replaced by the FAMA, that is Foreign Exchange Management Act of 2000, Import and Export Control Act, replaced by the Foreign Trade Development and the Regulation Act in 1992, etc., provide the government with sweeping powers to control over the industry and commerce so much that the government cannot escape responsibility for any shortfalls, drawbacks, or imperfections in these sectors for the vital importance of the economy. Next over here is there are quite good number of industrial and labor laws which regulate the employers' relations, working conditions, wages, bonus, labor welfare, and the social security, etc. As the commercial banking sector was brought under the effective control of the Reserve Bank of India by banking and the Amendment Act of 1962 of the banking laws, the Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1963, etc. Thus, the Securities Exchange Board of India, SEBI, regulates the capital market. The indirect control have also been playing their part in serving the national development goals. Various quantitative and the qualitative monetary weapons have been deployed from time to time to regulate the economy, mainly to control the prices. The number of the fiscal and the monetary incentives have also been offered to encourage the growth of such priority sectors such as export industries, small industries, and the small businesses. Thus, the monetary and the fiscal, financial, and the physical incentives have been provided to the industry and the small businesses. Monetary, fiscal, financial, and the physical incentives have been provided for the accelerated development of the backward regions, and the fiscal and the monetary policies have also been employed as incentives to discourage certain undesirable and the essential activities. As direct control has considerably grown the importance. No less important than the regulatory box in the promotional role of the government in India. Being mixed economy, the state has to provide the necessary facilitate for the growth of the private sector. Industrial policies have assigned the important role to the private sectors in a number of industries. In the state promotional role includes development of the infrastructure facilities, fostering the institutions to provide the financial and development of support to the businesses. Now, there are large number of hurdles of the control which are again being discussed in this part, which we can further understand. Next over here is the expansion in the entrepreneurial participative role of the state has been very spectacular. This public sector has grown substantially over the vertical and the horizons. The total investment in the central government in the industrial enterprises grown from 29 crores spread over the 5 units in April 1951 to 2 lakh 20,000 crore in over 236 units in 1998. In some industries, the public sector gained an absolute or nearly monopoly, and it has commanding position in number of basic and heavy industries. Both fresh investments and the nationalization has contributed to the growth and the expansion of the public sectors. More than 90% of the commercial banking sectors came to be in the hands of the state. Successive nationalism and the nationalism of the imperial banks and the establishment of the State Bank of India out of in 1955, the nationalization of 14 major private banks in 1969 and another 6 in 1980 have been mainly responsible for it. As the insurance business in the country too had been nationalized, the dawn of the present century has witnessed the move towards the privatization in these investments. Apart from monopoly in the field of the railway, transport, communications, and the air transport, the public sector accounted for the considerable share in the shipping and the road passenger transports. In the energy sector, the public sector is virtually monopoly in the coal mining, exploration, and refining of the petroleum, and in generation of the supply of the electricity. At one time, the public sector corporations accounted for nearly about 1/10 of the country's total foreign trade. The import and the exports of the certain important items are canalized through the public sector agencies. As a consequence of the liberalization, however, privatization, these investments have been spreading. The public distribution system has been expanded to remove the imperfections in the distribution of essential goods and to protect the interest of the vulnerable section. The government has been playing a major role as a planner. The Planning Commission was set up in 1950 and the first 5-year plan was launched in 1951 with the object of achieving the rapid rise in the standard of the living of the people by an efficient exploitation of the resources in the country and increasing the production and offering the opportunities to all for employment in the services of the community. Our 5-year plans place special emphasis on the improvement in the living conditions of the poor, that the objective of the distributive justice has been given added emphasis in the later plans. A significant aspect of the Indian planning in the respect of the democratic and the property rights, unlike in centrally planned economy. In Indian planning, there has been a balancing of the various economic elements and the sort of fusion of the public, private, and the joint sectors, heavily and lightly industries, and the big, medium, and the small cottage industries. In short, Roseanne observed unquestionably the Indian government held the levers that determined the level of the output of all the large and the medium-sized firms by own direct production of the wide variety of the inputs and the final products. Second, grant or refusal of the permissions to the private firms to produce the new items or to expand the production. Third, it is a provision of the capital funds and to control the security issues by the private firms. Fourth, it controls the access of the foreign exchange and to control the imports. There has been a very significant relaxation in control since 1991. Thus, we can summarize that the state and the government plays a very significant role in all the economies, including the market economies, the appellate and the extent and the nature of the state interventions and vary widely between the nations. Functions of the state varies from basic minimum requirement to the active participation in the several other sectors. As a function of the government may be classified among the continuum from the activities that will not be taken at all without state intervention to the activities in which the state plays an active role in coordinating the market or redistributing the assets. Thus, the economic roles of the government may be classified into the 4 categories. The figure 5.3 later, which gives the view of the summary view of the important functions of the economic roles of the state. Thus, the role of the government in India is guided by and governed by the principles and the provisions of the Indian Constitution of particularly significance and a preamble to the constitutions which indicates the objects and intention of the constitution, the fundamental rights which imposes the limitations of the state power and the directives principles of the state policies which suggest numerous socio-economic welfare responsibilities for the state, separation of the powers of the judiciary, executives and the legislature, and the division of the power and responsibility between the union and the states. Thus, the government control over the Indian economy grew enormously in the first 4 decades since independence. Since 1991, the India has been passing through the process of decontrols and economic reform, and this implies the redefinition of the role of the state. There has been a global trend towards decentralization of the power and the responsibility, and it has been true to the India too to some extent. The central government role in the industrial development has significantly diminished as a result of declining and substantial reduction in the role of the public sector. Now it is left with the state to play an active role in the industrial development by creating a conducive environment for the development of the industries, including attracting foreign investments. So this is a diagram, or this is the image in which the functions of the government and the economic roles are being discussed. So the basic function includes the functions of the government, in which the basic function includes including the pure public government, such as provisions of the property rights, macroeconomic stability, control of the infectious disease, safe water roads, protection of the destitute. Whereas the intermediate function includes such as management of the externalities, for example, pollution, regulation of the monopolies, provisions for the social insurance such as pensions, unemployment benefits. Whereas the activist functions, which include measures to stabilize and promote the market and to redistribute the assets and the incomes. Now, when you talk about the economic role of the government, the regulatory role includes regulations may cover a wide spectrum extending from entry into the business through the conduct of the business to final result of the business and to also to the exit. Because the regulation is very important for the proper functioning of the market economy. Second is the entrepreneurial role. Direct participation of the government in business was very common, particularly in socialist and the development countries. The reasons include ideological and the dearth of the private entrepreneurship and capital. Now the privatization, however, has become widespread since the mid-1980s. And next is the planning rule, the national necessity of the proper utilization of the scarce resources and the prioritization of the development objectives and the ideological reasons have made the important role of the government in developing the socialist countries. Thus, the promotional role is the last role, where it is more important of developing the countries than in the developed, because speeding development of the industry and the commerce and the economy requires development of the infrastructure, including the facilitating the organizations. Now, these are few things which you can take as a refer. For example, you can refer the demo, partially demo content on the business and government. Even books on the World Bank, and many more things are over there. Thank you, student. This is for the today's class. Now, over and you back over here. This is your faculty and coach Vivek Burda from the Mahavir University. You can connect back to me future on this topic if required. Thank you. Best wishes. Good day ahead.